Yeah. Okay. Hello?
Hello,
What's up? Okay, so who are we here with today?
my name is Evan Petrillo.
All right. My name is Elijah Staana, and today we are going to be talking about reparations. Of course, and to start off the big question, what should we do with reparations? Do you think we should have them or we should not have them?
I don't think reparations should be. I don't think reparations should be it.
I agree. And we'll dive into why we don't later. So the first thing I want to cite is from Katrina Forrester on the worst things that we've ever done, the media. She specifically stated that the issue with reparations is that, one, they're hard to calculate, and number two, a lot of people don't know what they look like, whether it should be financial, non-financial, governmental. And if you think, let's start off with a general idea, if reparations did happen, what would be the most sensible way of doing it?
In my opinion, the most sensible way would be to form programs that would affect the lives of who we want to affect, So in the case of Native Americans, it would be, in my opinion, land grants, or, maybe not grants, but given land back, instead of a cash payout. So I think a program that is specifically tailored to the group that we are talking about and to the individual that we're talking about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And for my next question, I do have a specific quote that I do want to bring out.
Okay.
And this is from the old Jim Crow on the podcast that we were doing in class. And this is from Adolph Reed. This guy specifically opposes reparations because he thinks it's a waste of time. It doesn't get us anywhere when it comes to addressing manifest inequalities that exist today. I think what we need to do is find ways to generate mass popular movement. I would urge everyone to forget the reparation stuff and to focus on concrete issues like housing, healthcare, education, employment that are meaningful and affect Black people on a daily basis. And slavery and Jim Crow did create a racial wealth gap between most Black families and most white families. Is it more effective to target issues that Black people are affected by the most, or to try and fill that racial wealth gap?
I think by affecting the issues that affect Black people the most, it will fill the racial wealth gap, because I forget what the statistic is, but people that go to college are X amount, or make X times the amount that people that don't go to college do. So if you put in better education, people will make more money. If you put in better housing, people will be able to live a better life. I think all of these things will not directly affect the lives of Black people and the economic stability of Black people, but I think it will indirectly affect the
And eventually close that wealth gap, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Eventually.
Those are questions.
Okay. So, in one of the three podcasts, you already talked about the first one. In the second podcast, $14 trillion and no mules, the William Darity talks about reparations, and in that podcast, they say if it was a cash payout, it would be roughly $800 to $870 or $70,000 per household, which would end up being $10 to $14 trillion nationwide. So, in your opinion, should reparations be paid?
No. If you're doing cash payouts, I don't believe that $14 trillion and $800,000, that single cash payout won't close a gap because there's a lot of factors. Was first of all, where are you going to get that money from? Because where are we going to get $14 trillion to help one group? That'll like raise taxes by a lot, I'm pretty sure. And of course, not just that, but there's other ways that we could help close that gap, like you were talking about focusing on these issues that affect Black people the most. And if we target those, then I think the way that we can do it would be starting off with attacking those issues instead of like full economic payouts.
And then, who should qualify for this money?
Well, anyone that's been affected by slavery. Okay. Because if we're talking about reparations, then we have to talk about slavery.
One subject the podcast talks about is the impacts of police brutality. Do you think monetary reparations would impact police violence?
Well, I think that's a lot. But if we do bring in these factors, right, there's a lot of socioeconomic factors that affect police brutality. There's redlining that basically like grouped up this group together in a low-income environment. And of course, that's going to foster like a stereotype, like, oh my gosh, you know? And then, while I do think that if we give off this money to these groups, it could help the demographics themselves. However, I don't think that it would impact police brutality. Okay. And yeah.
Okay, I share that same sentiment. I think that the policy and the views on race in this country need to change before money exchanges.
Because like money itself won't change how someone perceives a different race.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have another one last podcast of the three. It's called The Original Promise. I mean, you've heard of it. We've had to do it in class. But it opens with the quote, "Reparations is about a debt that the federal government owes to all Black American citizens of slavery." How would you define all Black American citizens of slavery, or of U.S. slavery?
How I would define all Black citizens of U.S. slavery? Well, I think a reoccurring theme that we've learned in class was that from HB 40, we had to we talked about living legacies and stuff. Mm-hmm. Of course, slavery didn't just end at, what do you say? Slavery didn't end, wait, what? Oh yeah. There's I think, of course, slavery didn't just stop at the 1800s. We actually talked about another thing. It was slavery by another name. Mm-hmm. There were slaves after the 13th Amendment where they loopholed it, and they industrialized the South they arrested Black people by masses and made them as workers for free through this process. Yeah. I think it was what was it called? It was
I remember that. It was the convict lease system. The convict lease system.
Lease,
yep. Yeah.
That one.
I remember what
that
one. You're talking about. Yep.
Yeah. When you think about living legacies, it didn't just stop, and that also affects families today. And I would say, honestly, descendants of slavery and also the people that were affected by it secondhand are the people.
So, you said affected secondhand. Would that include Black Americans that suffered through the Jim Crow era as well, after slavery?
Yeah, because once again, we can't say that slavery stopped after all that we've learned about the 13th Amendment and how it didn't just stop slavery as a whole. We had people getting prosecuted. There were vagabond laws that purposely targeted Black people. And of course, that created a rift between these classes. And I would say, yes, the Jim Crow era does incorporate like the that era of industrialization in the South where they needed black labor.
Okay.
So yeah, I agree that if we did make reparations, of course, if we did, then we should give that money to them too.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one question that stood out to me, because it's kind of a weird question on the podcast, is why should black people get reparations when there are so many other groups in the country who would have strong claims for reparations, but they are not asking for it right now? Mm-hmm. Why should black people in this country get reparations?
Well, America's history is a lot more complex than how I could put it, but of course, slavery was a big thing, and I would say it's probably the worst thing that happened in America. But there's also things that happened outside of that in other groups, like, for example, the Native American reservation systems, that literally took away land from them, stole land. And also, we have the Chinese Exclusion Acts, where, hold on, I actually have a list of them, where they hung people in Los Angeles. They restricted intermarriage, and also literally stopped Chinese immigration in 1882, called the Chinese Exclusion Act. And those things that, of course, they affected people too. And I think that no group deserves to get reparations over the other. However, it's important to acknowledge that slavery was the worst thing that we've done, so it would make sense to prioritize giving them reparations the most.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But to sum it up, I don't agree with reparations in the first place, because I feel like there's other ways for that money to go, and also where would that money come from?
Yeah. Okay. I agree with you. I think that it would be economically damaging and insufficient. Like, I don't think we would have enough money to pay reparations.
Yeah.
And I think the way that we would pay reparations, here's a check would not work. I think we need to get rid of the root cause of the racism and the racist views first.
Mm-hmm. To answer our original question from this project, should the United States pay reparations to the descendants of enslaved people? If so, then what form should they take? If not, how should Americans come to terms with the past? We both agree that reparations shouldn't happen because of how many issues that we talked about in the past 15 minutes. Yeah. But so I think how we should come to terms with the past is that we need to work on acknowledging it, and also these issues that constructed the racial wealth gap of education and housing and employment. Those specific forms of infrastructure should be funded towards and helped, because that would help close it, in my opinion, instead of straight $800,000.
I agree with those points. I think we have very similar views on this.
Yeah. And yeah, that ends it.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem. We have 18 minutes.
Good luck with this. This is gonna take so much editing.
Good luck with this editing.
I know.